Hey all, Siege here, and today I want to talk about something I noticed in the newest update that pretty much floored me. The thing is, I haven't seen anyone else even talk about it, and to me it's extremely significant, especially in regards to a concept I talked about in a previous video that this little development adds additional weight to. Now don't worry, a full analysis on the newest quest, amongst other things, is on the way, but what I need to talk to you all about today has to do with Cephalon Psi and his dialogue when doing some of the newest Corpus Railjack missions. Let me say that even though these missions are basically retreads of objectives we already have in game, the integration of different types of missions into the Railjack framework is a welcome one. Having the typical Railjack formula modified to include other already existing mission types, as well as an optional aspect where some additional rewards can be had, breaks up the monotony of an afternoon of Railjack, and I like that because whereas Railjack can be fun, it can also be kind of boring. So to me, at least, this adds a bit more to the game type and also makes the missions feel a bit more real, if you will. Just heading out to space to kill ships is cool, but heading out into space to do something specific and then encountering those same ships as an additional obstacle, in my opinion, offers a better immersion overall. Would I like to see even more done in this vein? Oh yeah. And I could see Railjack being an integral part in the upcoming raids Warframe is supposed to see at some point, especially with how hard DE is doubling down on Railjack. But that's not why you came here today, is it? You came here to talk about yet another part of the game that got my head spinning, and I know we're getting there. But before we do, I just want to say thank you to all who have come to support the channel and are at least willing to hear out my observations with a mostly open mind. For it being YouTube, I'd say the vast majority of you really treat me fairly when it comes to stuff I post, offering your opinions in a very respectful and decent manner. And I want you to know how much I appreciate that. This is a savage place, and I'm not going to be right about everything. I'm human, after all. So to have such an understanding and supportive audience is, I'm guessing, the best thing a YouTuber can ask for. So as the channel grows, and it has been, that's really all on you. So I just wanted to make sure to take a minute and acknowledge that. And your reward is this right here.
Arm the warheads. Fire full salvo. Take them down.
Lotus on the line. Handing off. Crew, good luck.
Eliminate Corpus threats.
Pretty mind-blowing, isn't it? First time I saw that, I was like, what the fuck? Did I see that correctly? Psi not only acknowledges the Lotus, but he actually brought her, or maybe more aptly, it, on board to go over mission parameters? I had to rewind the footage I'd recorded to make sure I just saw what I thought I just saw. And I'm going to be completely forthcoming with all of you when I say that after the Lotus's departure during apostasy, I had assumed, potentially wrongly, that DE left the Mecha Lotus in as a placeholder, if you will, to continue to explain mission parameters because they didn't want to have to rework the entirety of the game when it came to the Lotus character, who is present in almost every mission to tell us what to do. And the lore seems to suggest Ortis recreated the image of the Lotus as a substitute. And whereas this may in fact have a bit or a ton of truth to it, it would appear in this update they really own the idea. And I think it alludes to something pretty substantial. This may in fact not be the Lotus at all. Rather, this is the Lotus. It even looks like a Lotus. And it adds to a previous theory I had in the past that this entity is in essence the Chimera prologue was actually speaking about. The Chimera, a mythical female creature consisting of the head of a lion, a secondary head of a goat protruding out of its back, and finally the tail of a snake, especially with what the symbology of those aspects of the beast represent, are eerily similar to what we know of what I consider the Space Mom's 3 aspects and how they behave. First, we have the head of a lion, which I believe to be the helmet that we still have in our ships. The lion is a prideful creature that holds dominion over the natural world, the king of the jungle, if you will, with no natural predators to speak of. This would in fact mimic how the Lotus acted, and as Psi is apparently confirming, the helmet still does. The Tenno, led by the Lotus, have no natural predators. At this point, No one actively seeks out the Tenno to challenge them head on because, well, historically it doesn't generally bode well for them. And with every entity we've been forced to engage falling unceremoniously at our feet. The Lotus is the lion, and we, her pride, doing her and its bidding to this day. Almost everything the Tenno pursue comes from the Lotus Directive, and I believe that to be a pretty interesting parallel between how this portion of the Chimera, the lion, is portrayed. Moving on to the serpent aspect, I believe this to be specifically pointing to Nata. Now, the snake within the mythology of the Chimera alludes to the idea of being unpredictable, stealthy, and mysterious, something Nata very much emulates when we consider her infiltration of the Orcan society, being a major factor in having it crumble from within, and yet never actually physically engaging it. Also, could the sentients have ever predicted she would turn on them in the process, instead opting to assume the role of mother to the Tenno? Well, if you consider that the snake is also known for its duality, that on one hand it is associated with assertive power, and at the same time, a motherly protective nature, it really does seem to describe exactly what Nata at least came to be. A being of both worlds, the physical soul system as well as the ethereal void, of which she continues to strive for. The example being her wanting to connect the two worlds together with her desire for amalgams, a combination of the beings from this dimension as well as those given sentience from the dark dimension we know as the void. The caduceus, a symbolic staff representing the medical community to this day, of which we are given the visage of two snakes entwined around the staff of Asclepius, is the literal symbol of balance and equality, again matching up with her desire for balance instead of domination. In theory, the sentients could have decided to war against the corpus, but instead chose first to manipulate them, with Nata originally showing up to Aladvi as an old acquaintance named Regis, a person he believed was dead. Believing now he was being offered technology in order to advance the cause of his sect of the corpus, he comes to find out that it was Nata behind the interactions the whole time, instead desiring to integrate with them, which I think is very telling. Snakes are often thought of as the bridge between our world and the shadow in many cultures, with the Naga, does that word sound familiar? Being half-human, half-snake entities that actively seek a harmony between the physical and ethereal worlds, which I think accurately describes what we know Nata to be, at least in her behavior. One could even make the connection of serpents' propensity for transformation, shedding their skin periodically over the course of their existence in order to be reborn anew, again mimicking how Nata has in fact transformed herself. It's fairly obvious this is not how she originally looked before the infiltration of the Orcan, as her face is still clearly Margulis, with her retaining many of her humanly features as well. In fact, she is the only true sentient with a human face, unless you count Ballast, but he was originally a human. Add to all that how the sentients seem to revere her as the new mother, with the old one at least not appearing in any way outside of a trailer, and even then, the trailer is kind of vague as to what this mother even is. This may explain why she always seems of two minds these days, sometimes seeming fully on the side of sentience, but then in others appearing to be conflicted. I feel like we could even make the observation that, at this point, she is more like the snake than anything else, with her transformation being a key component in her appearance, and her desire to be a mother to all lining up quite nicely with the characteristics of the snake in this pretense. Now, if we move on to the final aspect of the Chimera, the goat, personally, I see it parallel Margulis, at least in what we know of her life. When looking at the goat in the context of the Chimera, there are a few observations that can be made that seem to parallel the behavior of Margulis directly. First, the saying, stubborn as a goat, most likely taken from the tendencies of the Capricorn in the zodiac, refers to the goat's unwavering dedication to things long after others have given up on it. Margulis, originally an Archimedean amongst the Orcan, a type of scholar within their cultures, most notable interaction at this point that we can at least see in-game is her stubbornly standing her ground against the Orcan leadership and their nefarious desires for the Tenno. She is so adamant in her beliefs that she chooses to accept death over compromise, an even more difficult decision when you consider her own lover Ballast desperately attempted to change her mind. She put her desire for righteousness over her own life and love, when most in this situation would choose an easier path. The goat also represents spiritual ambition and a desire for independence, something both Margulis and the Lotus display in their behaviors, being completely comfortable going their own way and many times doing things on their own, even in seclusion if it suits the situation. Goats are not known to be communal creatures and will go out on their own as well should their sensibilities provide them a reason to do so. Something that's in line with both Margulis making a stand against the Orcan, but also in how the Lotus secluded herself within the bowels of the moon. If she was the one to do it, of course. But if that isn't enough, consider another one of the main ideas attributed to the goat. Throughout history, the goat has unfortunately been the brunt of many of the ills of society. In fact, described within Leviticus 16, chapter 8 through 10, 2 goats were used in a ritual to both appease God and at the same time lessen the fury of whatever negative spirit the town or village had apparently angered. Most likely Azazel, sacrificing one goat for the Lord and burdening the other with their supposed sins, sending it to the forest typically to appease said demon. From this interaction, we get the common phrase scapegoat, as the goat sent into the wilderness was heavily burdened with the town's sins and would end up being the scapegoat to absolve their wrongdoings, instead of the actual people being held accountable for their own transgressions. Either way you look at it, Margulis fits this characterization, having the perceived sins of the Tenno being laid at her feet, and in the end, she being the sacrifice the Orcan made to appease this wrongdoing. After all, the Tenno lived on and became a part of Orcan society, and she became the scapegoat. In the end, I feel like there are just so many parallels to the symbolism of the Chimera with the journey of the Lotus that it's hard not to at least consider this to be the idea behind what DE was thinking, although I do believe there is room for other interpretations. In fact, the man on the wall is said to have a chimerical twin, and I think this could be alluding to the idea of an organism with 2 different sets of DNA, generally being a product from a fusion of different fertilized eggs, which end up producing an entity that is still attached, but with individual aspects coming from either set of DNA, symbolically mimicking the appearance of a quote-unquote chimera. Still though, if you can view the Lotus as the helmet, the human and the sentient, it follows the same logic. The only real question that I feel needs to be asked is, who or what made the helmet? I personally have some theories, especially one that references the brief message that periodically interrupts the player while loading into random missions, but I'd like to hear your take on things before I reveal my thoughts on that part. I don't think it's as cut and dry as it may first appear, and probably deserves a video itself to fully explain. But with that being said though, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and it gets you thinking about what's really going on with that helmet. I look forward to seeing what you all think about it. At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day today, a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.